The Scarecrow might not always be spoken of as one of Buster Keaton's classic short comedies, but it is almost 19 minutes of pure Keatonian joy and an essential Buster to boot. Released on November 17, 1920, it was the third of 19 short comedies that Buster created between 1920 and 1923. He had already learned almost everything he needed to know about comedy and performance as one-third of his family's vaudeville act, the Three Keatons, with his parents, Joe and Myra. He then served a film apprenticeship over a 3-year period with Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle as Roscoe's co-star, gag man, and sometimes co-director. By 1920, Buster was a fully assembled comedy persona, in appearance and in character, and ready to translate himself fully onto film and discover just what a Buster Keaton movie might be like. His early shorts find him experimenting with plots and themes and trying on situations, much as he would try on hats in Steamboat Bill Jr., not so much to find just one that fits well, but to test the waters and explore possibilities. His first effort, The High Sign, is a prodigious debut that introduces a filmmaker bursting at the seams with talent and ideas, but Keaton was not satisfied and temporarily shelved it. Nor would he continue with Bartine Burkett as his leading lady. His premiere would instead be with his second short, 1 Week, which was not just a perfect comedy debut, but also one of the all-time perfect comedies. Looking back at it now, though, it might not seem to be a totally typical Keaton film. Yes, the house as contraption announces Buster's love of the mechanical, and yes, the storm that climaxes the story might relate to the cyclone that figures so early and crucially in Buster's legend and mythology. One might even say that his cyclone raises the curtain on this first independent release in 1920, and also, sadly, returns to close that curtain at the end of his last independent release in 1928 with Steamboat Bill Jr. What might seem atypical about 1 Week occurs in the love department. Buster not only gets the girl, but they are married, and she fully reciprocates his love and shares, as an equal, in the ups and downs of this plot and their life. She is attractive, playful, a loving helpmate, her own person, and delightfully portrayed by Sybil Seeley. Seeley's role is smaller in Buster's next short, Convict 13, but she returns more prominently in his third release, The Scarecrow. Here, Keaton returns to the spirit of his apprenticeship, as he seems to be making a Roscoe Arbuckle film, but reversing the roles, with Buster now as the lead and Joe Roberts as an Arbuckle surrogate, playing the type of supporting part that Buster had once played. It even seems to pick up from where the last Arbuckle Keaton short, The Garage, had left off 10 months earlier, where Roscoe and Buster are roommates and live with ingenious labor-saving devices. Completing the Arbuckleian template is the appearance of Roscoe's dog, Luke. Reaching further into his past, Buster casts his own father, Joe Keaton, as Sybil's father. Part of the richness of The Scarecrow comes from the fact that it could be a prequel to 1 Week. One could actually construct a modest feature by connecting 3 Keaton-Seeley shorts into a Sybil or marriage trilogy. We start with The Scarecrow, where Buster courts Sybil, wins her over his rival, and marries her at the end. We continue with 1 Week, which begins after Buster has just married Sybil and they build their dream house, which is sabotaged by his ex-rival. We end with The Boat, where Buster and Sybil now have 2 sons and a boat named the Damn Fino, which, like the house in 1 Week, has a life of its own and becomes one of the main characters. Together, these shorts show just how much Keaton had grown in 1 year. They illustrate a kind of 3 ages or stages in his development. By the time we get to The Boat, the 10th and midway point of his 19 shorts, Buster has found the right hat, metaphorically, and also his footing. The sunny beginning of The Scarecrow has now led to the dark ending of The Boat. The storm from 1 Week returns with a vengeance as Buster and family are at sea and survive an almost apocalyptic bombardment. It seems to be a happy ending, but as they walk back to land, they could just as easily be walking toward a 2-reeler co-directed not only by Eddie Klein but also by Samuel Beckett. The Boat was Sybil's last major role with Keaton. Even after the earlier Scarecrow, her character no longer seemed to have a place in his films. She would be replaced by Virginia Fox, whose character could be receptive or, just as easily, cold, standoffish, and much less accessible. The frustration, conflict, and punishment that came from courting Virginia's type was probably better for comedy construction and especially crucial for Buster's. Perhaps it also made a difference that Virginia was, quite noticeably, a few inches shorter than Buster, whereas Sybil was much closer to him in height. Rudy Blesh, in his book on Buster, implies that Celie was replaced because she proved a little fragile. In that context, it helps to remember that Keaton's art was based on a physical, sometimes violent, acrobatic comedy that showcased him as a solo performer who might use and treat his leading ladies like props. But fragile or not, Sybil Celie remains, for many viewers, a favorite among Buster's leading ladies for the shared chemistry and mutual sense of love, ease, and intimacy that was briefly allowed to bloom on the Keaton landscape. 28 years later, in 1949, James Agee, in his article on silent comedy entitled Comedy's Greatest Era, wrote that Buster Keaton hopes to remake at feature length, with a minimum of dialogue, two of the funniest short comedies ever made, one about a porous homemade boat and one about a prefabricated house. Agee is obviously referring to The Boat and One Week. Keaton never did remake them, but we still have the originals, and that duet easily becomes a triptych by adding the Scarecrow. Even when seen alone, the Scarecrow is pure delight. With Buster in love, Sybil Celie during her short reign as Buster's queen, a generous Joe Roberts all are buckled up, a high-kicked and kicking Joe Keaton, the biting humor of Luke the dog, and a cornucopia of inventiveness in a quintessential silent slapstick short comedy that breathlessly leads to a chase, ends with a marriage, and allows us to savor the miracle, mystery, and astounding one-of-a-kind genius of Buster Keaton. Who could ask for anything more?